My name is Janice Flood Nichols. I'm a wife, a mother, a grandmother, a polio survivor, a polio pioneer, a medical counselor, and a vaccine advocate. I'm going to spend just a few minutes telling you about a time in our country that many people in my generation call the bad old days, the days before we had many vaccines for childhood diseases. My twin brother Frankie and I were in first grade. It was fall, and we were getting ready to go out Halloweening with our friends. Frankie had developed a little head cold a few days before Halloween, so my parents kept him home to make sure that he would be ready to go out Halloweening that weekend. But the day before Halloween, Frankie developed a terrible time breathing. My parents rushed him to City Hospital in Syracuse for communicable diseases. He was given a diagnostic spinal tap and immediately placed in an iron lung. By the next morning, his diagnosis had been confirmed. Frankie had polio. I was brought to the same hospital and given massive doses of gamma globulin, given up and down both arms and legs and the standard wet in the buttocks. It was the only thing that they knew that could sometimes prevent a case. By the next day, Frankie's condition had deteriorated even more. They could not control his secretions, so they decided to bring him to the operating room where they would perform an emergency tracheostomy. But Frankie died on the way to the operating room. It was November 1st, 1953, at 10:25 at night. In my faith, it's All Saints' Day. I decided and told my parents that I was going to go to every part of his wake, to his funeral mass, and even to his burial at the cemetery. I had never been away from Frankie for 1 minute, and I was not about to be away from him now. But that night, I developed symptoms of polio, and I deteriorated very rapidly. So my parents rushed me off to the same hospital where Frankie had died a few days before. The doctors told my parents that they really did not know whether I was going to live or die. A few days later, my mother suffered a miscarriage. 4 days after admission to the hospital, I woke up. I couldn't move, but I was too young and innocent to really understand what all of that meant. But I heard a baby coughing incessantly down the hall. I had never heard a cough like that, and I eventually learned that that baby had whooping cough. I have spent my whole life wondering whether that little baby lived or died from a disease that we now can prevent through vaccination. My rehab began the day that I woke up in the hospital, and soon, by the spring of 1954, just as I was beginning to kind of walk a little bit again, I was given an opportunity to be in the Jonas Salk polio vaccine trial. To this day, it remains the largest vaccine trial in the history of the world. I was one of just under 2 million children in first, second, and third grade from the United States, Canada, and Finland. We were called polio pioneers. We were told we were doing something not only for our own generation, but for all future generations. Our parents must have been very afraid to have us participate in a new vaccine trial, but they knew that they could not do anything that was going to prolong the terrible, terrible surge of polio. Thankfully, because of that vaccine, the United States was declared polio-free of the wild virus in late 1970s, but polio is still not eradicated worldwide. I speak to you today as a woman who lost her twin, who lost 2 of my friends from that terrible epidemic, who can still recall that little baby in the hospital, who had a friend in graduate school who was deaf from the measles, and the story of a woman that I met when we moved to the Pacific Northwest who told me about her little sister who died from chickenpox pneumonia, something that we now have not only a vaccine for, but antibiotics that can lessen such a case. I ask you to please talk to other grandparents. We all have stories, and believe me, this is so hard for me to even talk about over 70 years later than the day that I lost my twin. I want you to speak to professionals who can tell you the importance of vaccinating for all of the childhood diseases. Do not believe it when people tell you that these diseases are just simple rites of passage. They all have the ability to kill and maim. My twin brother and I were rambunctious, healthy children. My parents did everything imaginable to protect us. But nothing was going to protect us if polio found our community before the polio vaccine was made available. Please listen to people, ponder, but please vaccinate your children. We cannot go back to these bad old days.